The alien ship floated high above Earth like a dark cloud. No human could see it because it was hidden by special technology that made it invisible. The ship was called Silent Tide, and it belonged to a race of aliens called the Zephyrians. These aliens looked like tall gray creatures with big black eyes and long, thin fingers. They had been watching Earth for many months. Commander Vexthal stood on the bridge of his ship and looked down at the blue planet below. He had done this job many times before on many different worlds. His job was simple: take samples of life forms and bring them back to his home planet for study. But this time was different. This time he was not taking plants or animals. This time he was taking humans. "Are the teams ready?" asked Vexthal to his second-in-command, Officer Krindar. "Yes, sir. All 12 teams are in position. The human children have been located and tagged. We can begin the harvest when you give the order." Vexthal nodded slowly. He had studied the human species for months and decided that the younger ones would be best for their experiments. Adult humans were too big and too aggressive. But the small ones, the ones they called children, would be perfect. They were easier to handle, and their bodies would adapt better to the alien laboratory conditions. "Begin the harvest," he commanded. Far below on Earth, it was a warm summer night. At Camp Wildwood in Colorado, 10-year-old Jake Martinez was lying in his sleeping bag and talking quietly with his tent mate, Billy Cohen. They had been best friends since the first day of camp and were excited about tomorrow's hiking trip. "Do you think we'll see any bears?" whispered Billy. "I hope so," Jake whispered back, "but not too close. My dad told me bears can run really fast." Both boys were tired from the day's activities, but too excited to sleep. They had spent the day swimming in the lake, playing capture the flag, and roasting marshmallows around the campfire. Tomorrow would be their last day at camp before going home to their families. Outside their tent, something strange began to happen. The air started to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot pavement. A soft humming sound filled the air, so quiet that the sleeping camp counselors did not wake up. But Jake heard it. "Billy, do you hear that?" He whispered. Before Billy could answer, a bright blue light filled their tent. Both boys tried to scream, but no sound came out. Their bodies felt heavy and sleepy. The last thing Jake remembered was seeing tall gray figures walking toward their tent before everything went black. 300 miles away, in a small town in Ohio, 8-year-old Lucy Davis was having trouble sleeping. She had gotten up to get a drink of water and was looking out her bedroom window at the backyard. Her parents were asleep down the hall, and the house was quiet except for the ticking of the old clock in the kitchen. Lucy loved looking at the stars. Her teacher had taught her class about constellations, and she was trying to find the Big Dipper when she noticed something odd. One of the stars seemed to be moving. It was getting bigger and brighter. "That's weird," she said to herself. The moving star came closer and closer until Lucy could see it was not a star at all. It was round and silver and made no sound as it floated down toward her backyard. Lucy wanted to run and wake up her parents, but her feet would not move. She felt like she was in a dream. The round object landed softly on the grass behind her. House. A door opened and 3 tall gray figures came out. They moved in a way that looked like they were floating instead of walking. One of them looked up at Lucy's window, and their eyes met. Lucy tried to scream, but like Jake and Billy, no sound came out. The gray figure pointed something at her window, and the same blue light filled her room. She felt very sleepy and very heavy. The last thing she remembered was falling backward onto her bed. All across the country, the same thing was happening. In a farmhouse in Kansas, 6-year-old Tommy Burns was taken from his bed while his parents slept. In a suburb of Phoenix, 9-year-old Amy White disappeared from her backyard where she had been looking for her lost cat. In a small town in Maine, twins Peter and Paul Green were taken from their bedroom while they slept. The Zephyrian teams worked quickly and quietly. They had done this before on other worlds and knew exactly what to do. Each team had a list of targets, human children between the ages of 6 and 12 who lived in isolated areas where their disappearance would not be noticed right away. Back on the ship, Dr. Kefron was preparing the laboratory for their new specimens. She was the chief scientist on the mission and had been studying alien life forms for over 50 years. She was excited about examining these human children. "How many do we have?" she asked her assistant. 17 specimens have been collected," the assistant replied. "All are in perfect condition and have been placed in stasis pods." Dr. Kefran walked through the holding area where 17 glass containers lined the walls. Inside each container, a human child floated in a special blue liquid that kept them alive but unconscious. She could see Jake Martinez and Billy Cohen in pods next to each other. Lucy Davis was in a pod near the window. All the children looked peaceful, like they were having a nice dream. "Excellent," said Dr. Kefron. "Begin the preliminary scans. I want to know everything about their biology, their genetics, their brain patterns. These specimens will help us understand how humans develop from childhood to adulthood." She made notes on her electronic tablet as she walked from pod to pod. Each child was given a number instead of a name. Jake Martinez became Specimen 001. Billy Cohen became Specimen 002. Lucy Davis became Specimen 003. To the aliens, they were not children with families who loved them. They were just things to be studied. Commander Vexthal was pleased with the success of the mission. His teams had completed their work without being detected by human authorities. The primitive humans had no idea that 17 of their young had been taken. By the time they realized the children were missing, the silent tide would be far away from Earth. "Set course for the laboratory station," he ordered. "We have what we came for." The ship began to move away from Earth. Inside the laboratory, the 17 children floated in their pods, unaware that they were traveling through space. They were unaware that they were millions of miles from home. They were unaware that their parents would soon wake up and discover they were gone. But most importantly, the aliens were unaware of something crucial about humans. They did not understand that taking human children was not like taking samples from any other species. They did not know that human parents would do anything, fight anyone, and travel anywhere to get their children back. They did not know that they had just made the biggest mistake in their species. History. As the silent tide disappeared into the darkness of space, the first human parent was waking up. In Colorado, a camp counselor was doing his morning check of the tents. When he reached Jake and Billy's tent, he found it empty. The sleeping bags were still warm, but the boys were gone. Called out their names, but there was no answer. He searched the area around the tent, but found no footprints, no signs of struggle, nothing to explain where 2 10-year-old boys could have gone in the middle of the night. What he did find was something strange. The grass around the tent was flattened in a perfect circle, and in the center of that circle, the ground was still warm to the touch. The first 24 hours after the disappearances were filled with confusion and fear. Parents called police stations across the country. Search teams formed in small towns and big cities. Dogs sniffed through forests and fields, looking for any trace of the missing children. But by the second day, something strange became clear. All the missing children had vanished in the same way. There were no footprints, no signs of struggle, no ransom notes or phone calls from kidnappers. Just 17 children gone without a trace, all taken on the same night. Detective Maria Santos had worked missing person cases for 15 years, but had never seen anything like this. She stood in Lucy Davis's backyard in Ohio, staring at the circle of flattened grass that surrounded the house. The grass was burned at the edges, and the soil underneath was still warm, even though 2 days had passed. "This doesn't make sense," she said to her partner, Detective Frank Lee. "No human could do this. Look at this burn pattern. Look at how perfect this circle is." Detective Lee knelt down and touched the ground. It felt strange under his fingers, like it had been exposed to some kind of energy he had never felt before. "Maria, I think we need to call the FBI. This is bigger than local police can handle." Similar conversations were happening in police stations across 12 different states. The missing children came from Colorado, Ohio, Kansas, Arizona, Maine, Texas, California, Oregon, Florida, Virginia, North Dakota, and Alaska. The locations seemed random, but the method was always the same. Perfect circles of burned grass. Warm. Soil. No other evidence. By the third day, the Federal Bureau of Investigation had taken over all 17 cases. Special Agent Carol White was put in charge of the investigation. She had handled kidnapping cases, terrorist attacks, and organized crime, but nothing had prepared her for what she found in the case files. "This is impossible," she told her team during their first meeting. 17 children taken from 12 different states on the same night, with no witnesses, no evidence, and no demands from kidnappers. Either we're dealing with the most organized crime group in history or something else entirely. Agent Robert King, who specialized in unusual cases, raised his hand. "Carol, I think we need to consider that this might not be a human crime. The evidence at each site suggests technology we don't understand." The room went quiet. Nobody wanted to be the first to say what they were all thinking. Finally, Agent White spoke the words that changed everything. "Are we talking about aliens?" The question hung in the air like a dark cloud. For 3 days, parents had been crying on television, begging for their children to be returned. For 3 days, the best investigators in the country had found nothing. No leads, no suspects, no hope got, but now they had a theory that seemed impossible but fit all the evidence. Within hours, the case was transferred to a secret government department that most people didn't know existed. The Extraterrestrial Defense Initiative had been created 10 years earlier, after several UFO sightings that could not be explained. Their job was to prepare for the possibility that Earth might someday be visited by beings from other worlds. General Patricia Holmes had been waiting for this day her entire career. She had studied every UFO report, every strange sighting, every piece of evidence that suggested humans were not alone in the universe. But she had hoped that first contact would be peaceful. She had never imagined it would begin with the theft of children. "Bring me everything," she ordered her staff. Every radar reading from that night, every satellite image, every weather report. "If something flew in and out of our atmosphere, I want to know about it." The answer came faster than anyone expected. Deep space monitoring stations had detected an unusual object on the night the children disappeared. It had appeared suddenly at the edge of Earth's atmosphere, moved in patterns that no human aircraft could achieve, and then vanished just as is. Quickly, Admiral Kevin Stone, head of the newly formed Space Force, presented the evidence to a room full of military leaders, government officials, and scientists. The holographic display showed a 3-dimensional image of Earth with a small red dot moving around it. This object was approximately 800 feet long and 200 feet wide, Admiral Stone explained. It moved without any visible propulsion system and ignored the laws of physics as we understand them. It was here for exactly 6 hours and 37 minutes. President Catherine Wells, who had been briefed on the situation just 1 hour earlier, asked the question everyone was thinking. "Are you telling me that aliens came to Earth and kidnapped our children?" "That appears to be the case, Madam President." Silence in the room was broken by Dr. Elena Rodriguez. the world's leading expert on the possibility of extraterrestrial life. She had spent 20 years studying the universe and trying to predict what alien contact might look like. "If this is true," she said slowly, "then we need to understand what we're dealing with. Any species capable of interstellar travel would have technology far beyond our own. They could destroy us easily if they wanted to. The fact that they only took children suggests they see us as subjects for study, not as a threat." General Holmes stood up and walked to the front of the room. Her face was hard and her voice was cold. "Dr. Rodriguez, I appreciate your scientific perspective, but these aren't subjects for study. These are our children, and I don't care how advanced their technology is or how powerful their weapons are. We're going to find them and bring them home." The president nodded in agreement. "General Holmes is right. I'm authorizing the largest mobilization of resources in our nation's history. Every scientist, every engineer, every soldier, every intelligence agent. I want them all working on this problem." "What about the other countries?" asked Secretary of Defense James Carter. "Some of the missing children are from families with dual citizenship. We're going to need international cooperation." Within 6 hours, emergency meetings were taking place in capital cities around the world. The leaders of every major nation were briefed on the situation. The response was immediate and unanimous. This was not just an American problem. This was a human problem. The British Prime Minister was the first to offer full support. "Our children were not taken, but they could have been. Every parent on Earth should be terrified by what happened. We will provide whatever assistance is needed." The Russian president made a similar statement. The Chinese premier offered their most advanced technology. The leaders of France, Germany, Japan, India, and dozens of other countries pledged their full cooperation. For the first time in human history, every major nation on Earth was working together toward a single goal. Political differences were set aside. Economic competition was forgotten. Religious disputes were ignored. All that mattered was bringing 17 children home. Dr. Rodriguez found herself in charge of the scientific response team, working with the brightest minds from every country. Their job was to figure out how to track an alien spacecraft and develop the technology needed to reach it. "We need to think differently," she told her international team of scientists and engineers. "Everything we know about space travel is based on chemical rockets and nuclear power. But these aliens move faster than anything we thought was possible. They must be using physics we don't understand." Meanwhile, General Holmes was building something that had never existed before, a truly international military force designed for space combat. Soldiers from every nation trained together. Pilots learned to fly experimental aircraft. Engineers worked day and night to build weapons that might work against alien technology. The parents of the missing children became the driving force behind everything. They appeared on television every day, holding pictures of their sons and daughters. They organized rallies and protests. They demanded action from their governments. Their grief and determination touched the hearts of people around the world. Jake Martinez's father quit his job to search for his son full-time. Lucy Davis's mother started a foundation to support the families. Billy Cohen's parents contacted every scientist they could find, begging for help. Their pain was shared by millions of parents who realized that their own children could have been taken just as easily. The message was clear, and it spread around the world in every language. Someone had taken our children, and we will not rest until they are returned safely. What the humans did not know was that their response was being watched by other alien species throughout the galaxy. Most of them had seen the Zephyrians conduct their research missions before. Usually, the target species would search for a while and then give up when they realized their missing members were gone forever. But the human response was different. Instead of giving up, they were getting stronger. Instead of accepting their Loss, they were preparing for war. Instead of mourning their children, they were building the technology to cross space and find them. For the first time in galactic history, an entire species was mobilizing to rescue their captured young. And that terrified the aliens, who were watching much more than it impressed them. Far across the galaxy, on a space station that orbited 3 purple suns, Ambassador Threnke was having the worst day of his very long life. The tall blue alien had served as a diplomat for the Galactic Council for over 200 years. He had seen wars between star systems, the rise and fall of entire civilizations, and the discovery of countless new species. But he had never seen anything like what was happening on Earth, .thr, and single quotes key belonged to a species called the Altarians. They were peaceful traders and explorers who had been watching human development for the past 50 years. Unlike the Zephyrians, the Altarians believed in studying other species from a distance without interfering. They had learned to respect the dangerous potential they saw in the human race. Now, as he watched the reports coming in from Earth, Threnke felt a cold fear growing in his chest. The humans were not reacting the way most species did when they come to. Zephyrians took their members for research. They were not giving up. They were not accepting their loss. Instead, they were doing something that no other species had ever done before. They were preparing for war. "This is a disaster," Threnke said to his assistant, a young Altarian named Keftai. "The Zephyrians have made a terrible mistake." Keftai looked confused. "But Ambassador, the Zephyrians have conducted research missions on hundreds of worlds." "Why is this different?" Threnke activated a holographic display that showed images from Earth. Military bases were expanding. Scientists were working around the clock. Factories were building new types of weapons and spacecraft. Most frightening of all, every human nation was working together with a unity that Threnke had never seen in any species. "Look at this," he said, pointing to the images. "The humans are not treating this as a tragedy to mourn. They are treating it as an act of war to respond to. And there is something you must understand about humans, young Keftai. They are the most dangerous species we have ever encountered." Keftai laughed. "Dangerous? Ambassador, they can barely travel to their own moon. Their weapons are primitive. Their technology is centuries behind the Zephyrians." Threnke's blue skin turned darker, which was a sign of great worry among his people. That is what makes them so dangerous. They are not advanced, but they are determined beyond any measure we understand. Do you know what humans do when their children are threatened? They protect them like any species would. No, Threnke said quietly. They become something else entirely. Something that frightens even me. The ambassador called up more files on his computer system. These were secret reports that the Altarians had been gathering about human behavior for decades. The files showed human wars, human sacrifices, human achievements that should have been impossible. "Look at their history," Threnke said. When human children were taken by members of their own species, they would cross oceans to find them. They would climb mountains, cross deserts, fight through armies. They would sacrifice their own lives without hesitation if it meant saving their young. He showed Keftai images of human parents throughout history. Mothers who had fought wild animals with their bare hands to protect their babies. Fathers who had died defending their children from enemies. Communities that had given up everything they owned to search for missing young ones. But those were individual humans, Keftai said. This is their entire species facing a technologically superior enemy. Surely they understand they cannot win. Threnke made a sound that was the Altarian equivalent of a bitter laugh. That is exactly why. They are so dangerous. Humans do not think about whether they can win when their children are in danger. They only think about fighting until they do win or until they die trying. The ambassador pulled up more recent data from Earth. The information was terrifying. In just 2 weeks since the abductions, humans had made scientific advances that should have taken them decades. They were reverse engineering alien technology found at crash sites from years past. They were building weapons designed specifically to fight in space. They were training soldiers for combat in zero gravity. "Look at this," Frankie said with growing alarm. "They have discovered how to track energy signatures across interstellar distances. They are building spacecraft using principles they learned from studying our own technology. And most frightening of all, they are doing it with a speed and efficiency. That should be impossible." What worried Frankie most was not the human technology, but the human attitude. Every report from Earth showed the same thing. The humans were not hoping to negotiate. They were not planning to trade or bargain. They were preparing to hunt down whoever had taken their children and make them pay. They are not approaching this like a diplomatic problem, Frankie explained. They are approaching it like a war of survival. And when humans fight for survival, they become the most creative and ruthless warriors in the galaxy. Keftai was beginning to understand why his mentor was so frightened. "What should we do?" "We must warn the Zephyrians immediately. They need to return those human children before it is too late." Frankie opened a communication channel to the Zephyrian ship, Silent Tide. It took several hours for the message to cross the vast distance of space. But finally, Commander Vexthil's image appeared on the screen. "Ambassador Threnke, Vexthil," said with obvious annoyance. "I am busy with important research. What do you want?" "Commander, you must listen to me very carefully," Threnke said urgently. "You have made a catastrophic error. You must release the human specimens immediately and flee from that system as fast as your ship can travel." Vexthil's reaction was exactly what Threnke had feared. The Zephyrian commander laughed with the arrogance of a species that had never been challenged. "Release valuable specimens? Are you insane? These humans are a primitive species that has barely learned to leave their own planet. My ship has shields that their weapons cannot penetrate and technology they cannot comprehend." "You fool," Threnke said with genuine terror in his voice. "Do you not understand what you have done? You have taken their young, their offspring, their children. There is no force in this galaxy more dangerous than a species protecting its children and humans. Our apex predators, who have spent their entire evolution learning how to kill." Threnke began transmitting data files to the Zephyrian ship. The files contained everything the Altarians had learned about human warfare, human determination, and human responses to threats against their young. "Look at these records," Threnke pleaded. "Humans have fought wars that lasted for decades over territory. They have sacrificed millions of their own lives to protect their way of life. They have developed weapons capable of destroying their entire planet. And that was when they were fighting each other. Now they are united against a common enemy who has taken their children." Vexthil glanced at the data files but dismissed them quickly. Interesting, but irrelevant. They are still a primitive species with inferior technology. "Commander, please, listen to me. Other species conduct raids for resources or territory. When they face superior technology, they surrender or negotiate. But when humans fight for their children, they do not seek victory. They seek complete annihilation of the threat. They will not stop until every member of your species is dead or until they are all dead themselves." Threnke showed Vexthal more recent data from Earth. The human military buildup was accelerating. Their technology was advancing faster than any species the galaxy had ever seen. Most importantly, their determination was absolute. "Look at their communications," Threnke said desperately. "They are not discussing terms for negotiation. They are not planning diplomatic solutions. They are calculating how many ships they will need to destroy your entire civilization." But Vexthil was too arrogant to listen. He had centuries of successful research missions behind him. He had studied dozens of species, and none had ever posed a threat to Zephyrian technology. Ambassador, I appreciate your concern, but it is misplaced. The humans may be angry, but anger means nothing against superior firepower. If they attempt to rescue their specimens, we will simply destroy their primitive ships and continue our research. Threnke felt his heart sink. He had known Vexthal for many years and recognized the stubborn pride that made Zephyrians such effective researchers, but such poor diplomats. Then you have doomed your species, Threnke said quietly. When the humans come for their children, they will not come as explorers or diplomats. They will come as destroyers. And they will not stop until they have burned your entire civilization to ash. Your warnings are noted and dismissed, Vexthal replied coldly. Now, if you will excuse me, I have important work to do. The communication channel closed, leaving Threnke staring at a blank screen. He had failed to convince the Zephyrians to return the human children. Now he could only watch as two civilizations prepared for a war that would change the galaxy forever. Kevtai looked at his mentor with confusion. Ambassador, if the humans are really so dangerous, why don't we warn the Galactic Council? Surely they could force the Zephyrians to return the children. Threnke shook his head sadly. The Council will not act until it is too late. They see the Zephyrians as a major power and the humans as a primitive species. They will not believe that 17 missing children could lead to interstellar war. Then what do we do? 6 months had passed since the night 17 children vanished from Earth. In that time, humanity had transformed itself into something the galaxy had never seen before. The planet that had once been divided by borders, languages, and politics was now united by a single purpose that burned in every human heart like an unquenchable fire. Captain Ryan Mitchell stood on the bridge of the USV Retribution and looked out at the stars through the main view screen. The ship was humanity's first true interstellar warship, built from the combined efforts of every nation on Earth. It was not the largest ship humans had ever built, but it was the most deadly. Every piece of technology, every weapon system, every defensive measure had been designed with one goal in mind: finding the aliens who had taken human children and making them pay. Status report, Captain Mitchell said to his international crew. Lieutenant Commander Ashley Turner, who had been born in England but now served all of humanity, looked up from her sensor station. Long-range sensors are detecting elevated energy readings in Sector 7. The signature matches the theoretical models for Zephyrian propulsion systems. Dr. Jonathan Hayes, the mission's expert on alien languages and communication, had spent the last 6 months learning everything possible about the species that had taken the children. He had studied their technology, their culture, their history. Most importantly, he had learned their language so he could deliver humanity's message in words they would understand. Are we certain it's them? Captain Mitchell asked. The energy signature is a perfect match for readings taken from the abduction. Sights, replied Chief Engineer Lisa Park, who had helped design the Retribution's revolutionary propulsion system. This is definitely the ship that took our children. Captain Mitchell nodded slowly. Behind him stood representatives from 12 different countries, each one chosen because they had lost children in the abductions. Jake Martinez's uncle, Colonel Diego Martinez, served as the ship's tactical officer. Lucy Davis's older brother, Lieutenant Alex Davis, operated the communications array. Billy Cohen's father, Dr. Samuel Cohen, had insisted on joining the mission as a civilian advisor. These were not professional soldiers seeking glory or conquest. These were family members who had spent 6 months learning to fight in space so they could bring their children home. How long until we reach them? Asked Colonel Martinez. 18 hours at current speed, answered Commander Turner. Captain. Mitchell activated the ship's internal communication system so he could speak to the entire crew. Attention all hands. We have located the alien vessel that took our children 6 months ago. In 18 hours, we will make contact with them. I want everyone to remember why we are here. We are not here for revenge, though we all want it. We are not here for conquest, though we have the power for it. We are here for 17 children who have been away from home for too long. Throughout the ship, men and women from every corner of Earth listened to their captain's words. In the engine room, Russian and American engineers worked side by side to maintain the experimental drive systems. In the weapons bay, Chinese and Israeli technicians prepared the most advanced weapons humanity had ever created. In the medical bay, doctors from Africa and Europe stood ready to treat the children they had come to rescue. The Retribution was not just a warship. It was a symbol of what humans could accomplish when they worked together for their children. As the hours passed, more ships joined them. The European Union had sent the battle cruiser Unity. The Asian coalition had contributed the destroyer Harmony. Even smaller nations had sent ships. The Brazilian corvette Hope carried a crew of volunteers who had sold their homes to fund the mission. The Canadian frigate Resolve was crewed entirely by parents who had children the same age as the missing ones. By the time they reached the alien ship, humanity had assembled a fleet of 47 vessels. It was not the largest fleet ever built, but it was the most determined. Every ship carried the same message painted on its hull in dozens of languages. Bring our children home. Commander Vextil was reviewing the latest research data when his sensor officer reported the approaching human ships. At first, he was merely curious. The humans had developed interstellar travel much faster than his scientists had predicted. But he was not worried. His ship's shields and weapons were far superior to anything the primitive humans could build. How many ships? He asked. 47 vessels of various sizes, the sensor officer replied. They are maintaining formation and approaching at steady speed. Vexthal was impressed despite himself. 6 months ago, these humans could barely reach their own moon. Now they had built a fleet capable of interstellar travel. It was a remarkable achievement for such a primitive species. Are they transmitting any communications? He asked. Yes, sir. They are broadcasting on multiple frequencies in our language. Dr. Kefran, who had been studying the human children for the past 6 months, looked up from her research. Commander, perhaps we should listen to what they have to say. The specimens have been more interesting than expected. The humans might be willing to trade for them. Vexthal activated the communication system. The voice that came through the speakers was calm and clear. It belonged to Dr. Jonathan Hayes, who had practiced this message 1,000 times. Attention, Zephyrian vessel. This is the United Earth Fleet. We know you have taken 17 human children from our world. We demand their immediate return. You have 1 hour to comply with this demand. If you refuse, we will take them back by force. Vexthal almost laughed. The humans were trying to make demands of him. Open a channel, he ordered. This is Commander Vexthal of the research vessel, Silent Tide. You will turn your ships around and return to your home world immediately. The specimens you speak of are valuable research subjects and will not be returned. Your primitive weapons cannot harm this ship. The response came quickly. Commander Vexthal, this is Captain Ryan Mitchell of the USV Retribution. I am speaking to you as a representative of every parent on Earth. Those are not specimens. They are our children. They have names and families who love them. You will return them now, or we will take them from you. Your threats are meaningless, Vexthal replied. Leave now or be destroyed. There was a long pause before the human captain spoke again. When he did, his voice carried a coldness that made even the experienced Zephyrian commander feel uncomfortable. Commander, I don't think you understand the situation. We are not here to threaten you. We are here to collect our children. What? Happens to you and your crew depends entirely on whether you cooperate or resist. Dr. Kefron looked worried. Commander, perhaps we should consider their offer. The specimens have provided valuable data, but they may be more trouble than they are worth. Nonsense, Vexthel snapped. These humans have traveled far from home and built impressive ships, but they are still using primitive technology. Our shields can withstand anything they can throw at us. He was wrong. The first human weapon to strike the Silent Tide was unlike anything in the Zephyrian database. It was not an energy beam or a kinetic projectile. It was something entirely new, something born from 6 months of human desperation and ingenuity. The weapon bypassed the alien shields completely and struck the ship's hull with devastating effect. Emergency alarms began sounding throughout the Zephyrian vessel as systems failed and power fluctuated. What was that? Vexthel demanded. Unknown. Weapon type, his tactical officer reported with obvious fear. It seems to disrupt our shield harmonics at the quantum level. I've never seen anything like it. A second weapon struck the ship, this one targeted at the engine systems. The Silent Tide lurched violently as its propulsion failed. A third weapon disabled their communications array. A fourth took out their defensive weapons dot in less than 2 minutes. The most advanced research vessel in the Zephyrian fleet had been reduced to a floating target. How is this possible? Vexthel asked in shock that Dr. Kefron, who had spent months studying human psychology and behavior, provided the answer. Commander, we made a fundamental error in our assessment of this species. We assumed that their primitive technology meant they were not dangerous. But humans do not rely on existing technology when they are desperate. They invent new technology. She pulled up the research data she had gathered from studying the human children. Look at these brain scans, Commander. Human neural patterns show incredible creativity and adaptability when they face impossible challenges. They do not think like we do. When we encounter a superior enemy, we calculate our chances and surrender if we cannot win. But humans do not calculate. They innovate. Another wave of human weapons struck the ship. These were different from the first ones, designed to target specific systems without causing total destruction. The humans were not trying to destroy the Silent Tide. They were trying to disable it so they could board it. All ships, prepare for boarding operations, came Captain Mitchell's voice over the communication system. Remember, our primary objective is the children. Everything else is secondary. Vexthel finally understood what Ambassador Threnke had tried to warn him about. The humans had not come to negotiate or demand. They had come to take their children back, and they had built the weapons to do it. The boarding pods attached to the hull of the Silent Tide with metallic clangs that echoed through the alien ship. Inside the Zephyrian vessel, emergency lights flashed red and alarms wailed as the crew prepared for something they had never experienced before, humans coming to take back their children. Major Lisa Campbell led the first boarding team through the breach in the alien hull. She was a mother of 2 from Canada who had learned to fight in zero gravity after her government asked for volunteers. Behind her came soldiers, Marines, and Special Forces operators from every continent on Earth. They moved with the deadly precision of professional warriors, but their eyes burned with the fury of parents who had been separated from human children for 6 months. Team 1, proceed to the laboratory section. Captain Mitchell's voice crackled through their communication devices. Team 2, secure the bridge. Team 3, find those children. Sergeant Danny Roberts from Australia kicked down the first door they encountered. Inside, 3 Zephyrian technicians cowered behind their equipment. They had never seen humans in person before and were shocked by how fierce they looked. These were not the peaceful, primitive creatures they had expected. These were predators who had traveled across space to hunt them down. Where are the children? Major Campbell demanded in perfect Zephyrian language. The alien technicians were too frightened to answer. They had heard stories about human violence, but had dismissed them as exaggeration. Now, facing armed humans who had somehow defeated their advanced ship, they realized the stories had been true. Level 3, Section 7. One of them finally whispered. The specimens are in the research laboratory. Major Campbell's face grew darker. They are not specimens. They are children. And if you have hurt them, nothing in this galaxy will save you from what we will do to your entire species. The boarding teams moved through the ship like a force of nature. The Zephyrians they encountered offered no resistance. Some ran and hid. Others simply froze in terror. A few tried to activate security systems, but the human hackers had already disabled everything that could threaten a rescue mission. Corporal Mike Johnson from Texas found the first group of Zephyrian guards near the laboratory entrance. They were armed with energy weapons that should have been superior to anything humans could carry. But when they tried to fire, their weapons simply stopped working. How? One of the guards asked in confusion. Corporal Johnson smiled grimly. You made one big mistake. You gave us 6 months to study your technology and figure out how to beat it. Every weapon you have, every defense you built, we found a way around it. The truth was even more impressive than the alien guards could understand. In 6 months, human scientists had not just learned to copy alien technology, they had improved it. The weapons the boarding teams carried were based on Zephyrian designs, but were more efficient, more powerful, and more reliable than the originals. Dr. Samuel Cohen, Billy's father, had insisted on joining the boarding team even though he was not a soldier. He had spent 6 months learning about alien biology and medicine so he could help treat the children when they were found. Now he followed the soldiers through the corridors of the ship, carrying medical equipment and fighting back tears of hope and fear. Here, Major Campbell announced as they reached a reinforced door marked with alien symbols. The laboratory is behind this door. The door was designed to withstand weapons that could destroy entire buildings. But the humans had not come to break down doors. They had come prepared for everything. Lieutenant Sarah Kim from South Korea attached a small device to the door's locking mechanism. Within seconds, the door slid open, as if welcoming them inside. What they found in the laboratory made every human present want to commit violence against every alien in the galaxy. 17 glass containers lined the walls, each one filled with blue liquid. Inside each container floated a human child, unconscious but alive. Tubes and wires connected the children to alien monitoring equipment. Computer screens displayed readouts of their brain activity, their heartbeats, their genetic information. For 6 months, Jake Martinez, Lucy Davis, Billy Cohen, and 14 other children had been floating in these tanks, while aliens studied them like insects under a microscope. Dr. Cohen ran to his son's container, pressing his hands against the glass. Billy, can you hear me? The boy inside did not respond. His eyes were closed, and he breathed through a tube that connected to his mouth. But he was alive. After 6 months of not knowing, his father finally knew his son was alive. Get them out of there, Major Campbell ordered. All of them, now. The human medical team, led by Dr. Elena Vasquez from Mexico, quickly figured out how to safely remove the children from their alien prison. One by one, the containers were opened and the children were lifted out. They were unconscious, but their vital signs were stable. Jake Martinez was the first to wake up. His eyes opened slowly, and he looked around in confusion. The last thing he remembered was lying in his tent at summer camp with his friend, Billy. Now he was in a strange place, surrounded by adults in military uniforms. Where am I? He asked weakly. Dr. Cohen, who was holding his own son, answered with tears streaming down his face. You're safe now, Jake. We've come to take you home. Billy? Jake asked, looking around. Where's Billy? He's right here, Doctor. Cohen said, showing Jake his unconscious friend. "He's going to be okay. You're all going to be okay." One by one, the other children began to wake up. Lucy Davis opened her eyes and immediately started crying when she saw strangers instead of her parents. Amy White from Phoenix asked for her mother. The twins Peter and Paul Green held hands and refused to let go of each other. The human soldiers, trained to be tough and emotionless in combat, found themselves wiping away tears as they watched the children's confusion and fear. These were the 17 young people they had crossed the galaxy to find. These were the children whose faces had been on every screen on Earth for 6 months. While the medical team worked to stabilize the children for transport, Major Campbell and her soldiers secured the rest of the ship. They found Commander Vextheel on the bridge, surrounded by his frightened crew. The Zephyrian commander had spent his entire career believing his species was superior to every other form of life in the galaxy. He had conducted research missions on dozens of worlds and had never been challenged. Now he faced a human major whose eyes promised death if he said the wrong words. "You will release my crew and return to your home world," Vextheel said, trying to sound authoritative despite his obvious fear. Major Campbell laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Commander, I don't think you understand your situation. Your ship is disabled. Your weapons are offline. Your crew is captured, and you have spent 6 months experimenting on human children." She stepped closer to him, and Vextheel could see the controlled rage in her eyes. "The only reason you and your crew are still alive is because our children are safe. If any of them had been seriously harmed, if any of them had died, we would have turned your entire home world into radioactive dust." Dr. Kefran, who had been studying the human children, spoke up from her position near the research station. "Major, you must understand, we meant no harm. This was purely scientific research. We were studying human development patterns." "You were torturing children," Major Campbell replied coldly. "Our children. And now you're going to face the consequences." Captain Mitchell's voice came through the communication system. "Major Campbell, what's the status of the children?" "All 17 children are alive and stable," she reported. "Medical teams are preparing them for transport. We'll have them back on Earth within the week." "And the aliens?" Major Campbell looked at Commander Vextheel with the expression of someone deciding whether to step on an insect. "Captain, I recommend we follow the plan approved by the Earth Council. We take their research data, we disable their ship permanently, and we send them home with a message." "What message?" Vextheel asked. Captain Mitchell answered from the Retribution. "The message is simple, Commander. You tell every species in this galaxy what happened here. You tell them that humans came across interstellar space to rescue 17 children. You tell them that we defeated your superior technology with weapons we invented in 6 months. And you tell them that if anyone ever takes human children again, we will not just come for the children. We will come for everyone who helped, everyone who knew, and everyone who could have stopped it but didn't." The boarding teams began evacuating the children to the human medical ship. Jake Martinez was carried past Commander Vextheel on a stretcher, still weak but awake. The boy looked at the alien commander with a mixture of confusion and anger. "Why did you take us?" Jake asked. "We were just kids at summer camp. We never did anything to you." Vextheel had no answer. For the first time in his life, he understood that his actions had consequences beyond his scientific research. These were not specimens. They were individual beings with families who loved them. As the last of the children were evacuated, Major Campbell prepared to leave the alien ship. She turned back to Commander Vextheel one final time. "Commander, your species made a mistake. That will be remembered throughout the galaxy for 1,000 years. You took our children, and we came for them. We crossed space, defeated your technology.